So we said the priority of Mark had to do with the fact that he probably wrote first, and the others used his manuscripts as they wrote theirs. But there's very different directions that each of these gospels are going, or audiences rather is a better way to say it. Better, very different audiences that they're trying to reach. There's, as Jake was saying, kind of a little mathematical quiz in here. It's the concept of Q, and uh, written out it would say M, or material, only in Matthew, and then L is for material that's only in Luke, and Mark equals Q plus M equals Matthew. Mark plus Q equals L plus Luke. So basically, what they're saying is that there is kind of some missing sections in the writings of the Gospels that uh, but for the most part, they're similar. But when we take them as a whole, we get the whole picture. So there's not any one of them that's telling us everything. In other words, we really have four Gospels. We're not talking about John in this passage, but by taking all of the Gospels together, and there's actually a class on that called the Harmony of the Gospels, we get the complete picture of, as best as possible, what we have in the way of Jesus' life and times here on earth, and experiences and that kind of thing. So we had a handout that the rest of the class will need to pick up. It's called Synoptic Gospels Seeing Alike. And so it begins by saying that the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has, and this is Matthew 13:11 through 17, whoever has been given more will be given in abundance. Whoever does not have, even when what he has will be taken from him. Then this is why I explain, or I speak to them in parables. Though seeing they do not see, though hearing they do not understand. To them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing and never understanding. You will be ever seeing and never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused, and hardly, and they hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes and hear with their ears, understanding with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. But blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous men long to see you, long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. That same kind of understanding there is also in the Gospel of Mark, but it's different. There it says, the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those that are outside, everything is said in just or in parables, so that they may ever be seeing and never perceiving, and ever hearing and never understanding. Otherwise, they might turn and be forgiven. And then again, similar words, but in a shorter statement, where we find in Luke chapter 8, verse 10, the knowledge of the secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to others I speak in parables, so that seeing they may see, through hearing they may not understand. So this is like a whole message in itself what this passage is about, but what we're trying to get a picture of there is the different styles in the writing. Now, if you have questions, we can talk about this later, as far as what is this meaning, what's it saying exactly. I don't really want to get into that right now because we extend the class quite a bit. to talk about the nature of what is being said there. But it suffices to say that the same things are said, but said a little bit differently. And it brings us to the difference in the way that these writers were writing. So as we look at kind of an overview of Mark, we discover that Mark, he actually had two names, John and Mark. You had a chance to read about that and to learn a little bit more about, through your reading, the person of John Mark. I highlighted a few things that I want to bring up, and I'll read through those. Perhaps the relative ease of his life made it harder for him to endure the differences in the life on the mission field. And I want to read that to you because the question was asked in the book, about why there was a kind of a problem with Paul and John Mark. And as we were alluding to there, John Mark had a different kind of lifestyle. He didn't know Jesus personally. He was a very young man, came along after Jesus' death, and was a disciple, a missionary, and he had what many believe was kind of a privileged upbringing, and many believe that there was his mother, his family were a little bit better off, and they welcomed and helped the gospel to get spread. But the result of that may have been that he was not as mission hardened as others, and it made it a little bit more of a struggle for him to be out in the field. But he does rally and becomes one who is very helpful. It goes on in the group discussion to ask what might have made Barnabas more forgiving to John Mark than was Paul. What do you think?
What might have made Barnabas more forgiving to John than Paul was?
Right.
They were cousins.
Okay, that's a good one, and then I think that because of that, he had a lot more depth of relationship, and he understood him. And when you know somebody and you understand them and you understand how they are acting or responding, you might not be as offended, when something happens or they do some particular action, as someone else might be who doesn't know them at all, and is not going to give them the grace that maybe you would be willing to give them. Not only was Barnabas an encourager, but it says that he was called the son of encouragement in Scripture. But the Bible tells us that Barnabas was John Mark's cousin, and Peter's past feelings and betrayal, maybe because of what happened between him and Jesus, might have given him more of a place of saying, I don't trust this guy. Men can't be trusted. He might be coming from that, but it's just kind of a guess along that line. But those are good examples of what might have happened in the behaviors and incidents there. So we went through the passages. Let's take a quick look at Mark's relation to the gospel. And so I'm going to give you a worksheet. So I need this, but I also need one more.
That bottom one?
Probably. Not that one. We'll get that one in a second.
That one?
Yeah, we're still only getting them all. Oh yeah, getting to know Mark, that's it. Man, these are solid. Okay, so
Find you one of those.
I think what I'll do is, based on how we are here today, I'm going to send this with you guys as kind of homework to work on. And I'll do the first one with you there, since I have the answer sheet for you.
Am I taking that?
You can't take the answer sheet.
Oh, that's the answer sheet. I need it though.
I know you do. So let's take a look at Acts chapter 12, verse 12. Or Acts, I'm sorry, yeah, it's 12, verse 12. I'm going to have to next week get into better light so I can actually read these things. So, clues to Mark's identity and life. What does it say there that gives us a clue in Acts 12:12?
It gives an identity of Mary.
Okay.
Is that correct? Is that
Acts
what you're
12,
asking?
Acts 12 and 12. What is it? What
That's where I'm at.
clues does it give us about Mark's identity and life?
That his mom was still alive. That they had they did meetings in their home.
Okay. What does it call him there? What does it call Mark?
John.
John Mark. So he uses both of his names to kind of let us know. You're right, going on through there, 12:25. So I'll let you guys do that, and then we have the answer sheets next week. We'll take a look at that. But instead of spending a lot of class time doing that, since we're small in number, let's skip that, take it home, work on it. But that's kind of what we want to do, is just kind of get a picture of who John Mark was by reading through the scriptures. Okay, so on Mark's relation to the Gospels, another handout that we have for you here. So the authorship, how do we know that Mark wrote this gospel? It says that no internal biblical proof exists, but there is a considerable body of internal existence, that including the testimony of the church fathers, list of the church fathers who refer to Mark's gospel, and that approximate the period and history in which he had written. So we have that. There's other kinds of proofs in just historical writings. Josephus and others refer to that. Historians that lived in that time period in the first century church that attribute the Gospel of Mark to John Mark. The date. When was the Gospel of Mark written? What do we find out from our reading?
Likely between 80-58 to 65.
Okay.
Which is just before or after Peter's death.
Okay. And he was he obtained most of the material from. Where did he obtain most of the material from?
From Peter, from the word of Peter.
Okay.
Peter's telling of it.
Okay. So first-hand accounts from the apostles, and so he took this down, wrote it down. Why did Mark write his gospel? What was the purpose of it?
He was living in Rome, so writing to the Roman Gentiles.
Okay. So now we're getting kind of into a picture of how, the kind of the audience to who they were writing. And all of us, when we're writing, we have an audience perceived in our mind, visible or invisible, that we're usually writing to, and that's the case with the Gospels as well. And we can see that John Mark was primarily zeroing in on the Roman Gentiles, and he was, it's his gospel kind of, he doesn't want to spend a lot of time talking about Jewish history, traditions, things like that, because they wouldn't necessarily understand that. So he wants to zip right to the facts and talk about the person and work of Jesus Christ and the miracles and the things that Jesus did, so that audience could more easily understand. All right, they wanted us to review, divide up into groups to talk about Mark's gospel seems to be written to the Roman Gentiles. Mark emphasizes, Jesus' actions and miracles, what Christ did, more than the things that Christ said. So he really does want them to know the power that Jesus was fully man, fully God, the power that he enacted, the miracles that he did while he was here on earth. So when we skip over to the backgrounds, they put Matthew and Luke together, and we take a look at that. I want to skip through and just touch on some things, because this is all things that you have read. And
Are we switching to Matthew and Luke?
We are, right. Okay. Matthew and Luke. These are all things that everyone's read. Matthew and Levi's two names are both Hebrew, according to the lesson's text. And what are the two possible reasons for this?
Levi, they think, was likely his given name, but they think that Jesus changed it to Matthew,
okay,
which became his apostolic name.
Okay. And you remember that when he found Matthew, what was Matthew's vocation? What was
Tax collector.
Tax collector. Okay. All right. After Matthew's mention in Acts 1 and 13, he disappeared from biblical record. The scripture doesn't really record where he went or his activities. Irenaeus writes he was an early church father and an apologist, and he said that Matthew preached the gospel among the Hebrews, and we're not told whether this ministry was to the Palestinians or abroad. Clement of Alexandria wrote that Matthew spent 15 years in this ministry, preaching to the Hebrews, and he wrote that Matthew went on to the Ethiopians, the Greeks, and the Macedonians, and Syrians, and Persians after that. So they want us to remind you that perhaps the most effective and enduring accomplishments in his writing was his writing of the gospel. And beyond that, we kind of lose a full picture of where all he went and everything that was accomplished by Matthew. Let's get past the group discussion. Matthew wrote gospel primarily to who? What was his audience?
Matthew's audience was to the Jewish people.
Matthew's audience was to the Jews, and that's who he's primarily writing to, and you can see that a lot as you read through Matthew, because he ties things. We just read that passage a moment ago where he was talking about this was done to fulfill what the prophet Isaiah said. He talks a lot about the feast and the festivals and all of those kinds of things, and he really matches, which is a beautiful piece of the four Gospels that we have. Matthew does a marvelous work of taking the prophetic things that were said and the types and the shadows of the Old Testament and showing how Jesus fulfilled those things, how that he is the Messiah. He was the one that was prophesied of and that God was sending, because all along the way he was fulfilling these prophecies by Isaiah and by the prophets of old, Micah, and all of them that prophesied about the coming of Jesus. There were some 444 prophecies, predictions about the work and person of Jesus Christ. And all of those things are fulfilled through Jesus' life in the New Testament. So Matthew doesn't necessarily touch on every single one of them by himself, but he covers a number of them and helps us to get a picture of how that Jesus is the Messiah. He is King of the Jews. He's Lord of Lords and King of Kings. So that is a great contribution that we have from Matthew. Because Matthew was focused on the Jewish readers, the book stressed the relationship of Jesus to the Jewish faith. He organized evidence to show that Jesus was the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. Okay. So, an overview of Luke then. We're looking at Luke. Skip over here to what sets Luke apart from Matthew and Mark. What do you think makes him different?
Well, he was a doctor.
He's a doctor? Okay. So Mark wrote to the Gentiles, and we have Matthew writing primarily to the Jews. Luke is the most complete and comprehensive of the Gospels. He touches on just about every single thing. He's very detailed, which would fit being a physician and his personality and who he was.
Kind of handy that he wrote Acts because of that then too.
Yeah. And so we get a real clear picture of a lot of things that he puts some detail to, including the last days of Jesus, the crucifixion, and helps us get a good picture of all of that. Okay, so after the general overview of these synoptic gospels, which get this up here where I can actually read it, which resonates most with you, the personality, the history, the writer, the purpose in the writing, the tone, the style of the book. Which of these kind of resonates more with you? Or I find myself a lot of times that I'll recommend one of the Gospels over others for people to start reading. And then I'll tell them, you need to read all of the Gospels when you first come to know Christ, you accept Him. But there's generally one that I will direct them toward. How about for you? What is?
I think I kind of like Luke because I just like his writing style.
Okay.
And that as you flow through into the book of Acts, it just seems natural to read them together because of the storyline, and it doesn't feel like there's any kind of a gap. Or sometimes if you just go from, John to Acts, how it's presented in the book, the writing styles are different, that it just seems kind of different.
Right. Yeah, and so, I've learned to really love reading through all of them, but I do find a lot of times that I will start people out either with the book of Mark or the book of John, and it just kind of depends on the person. But I think the book of Mark would be is a good starting place. It's I know that they're able to kind of get through that they'll have a kind of capsulized view of what happened with Jesus and the miracles and those kinds of things, and then encourage them to go ahead and read all the Gospels, in giving people this explanation too of how the audiences of the Gospels, especially for the Synoptic Gospels, is a good thing to do. So remember that and be able to give them, kind of an understanding of who the particular audience is, and I think that helps them in their reading as well. Okay, so next week you're going to have chapter 3 and chapter 4 out of that book. So what we'll do now is shift gears. For those of you who didn't get these handouts, I'm going to make sure that you get those so that you can do the things that we need to do for the class. All right, so looking at Rick Warren's book on the purpose-driven church, I was talking to Jake and asking him, and he said he was really enjoying that. It's very easy to read, and I think that anybody that has aspiring to go into ministry, that to me this has to be a good starting book for you to read. It really, whether you're going to be a pastor or not, I don't think it really matters. It just really gives you a great picture of the church and how the church operates, how it works best, and some behind-the-scenes things that a lot of times people don't know. So in the preface, which maybe not all of you had a chance to read, there were some things there that I've always really liked, and I'm going to hit a few of the highlights of that. He said, only God makes the church grow. Only God can breathe new life in the valley of dry bones. Only God can create waves of revival, waves of growth, waves of spiritual receptivity. Apollos watered. He talks about the Old Testament. Paul planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So throughout Scripture, and going even back to the book of Acts, it says God added to the church such as should be added daily. So
we don't have a preface in our book.
It's important to, it's going to be like right by where that wrong question section was, just before that. Wherever you have that, it will be. Remember I asked you, what is the wrong question to ask? That little highlighted area right there. It'll be one page back from that. It probably is a little bit different. I think you guys have a newer version of it, but it'll be right there. So he may have went ahead and included that in the actual chapter. So if that's where that is, I'd turn back one. That's where you'll find those remarks that I just read. It's like you've underlined a lot of that too. So I think one of the important things for all of us to understand as those who are aspiring to be spiritual leaders in his church is what we can do and what we can't do. So, he makes that real clear at the very beginning that, what he points out, the wrong question for us to ask, and that would be, what will make our church grow? And then he points out what is the right question. The right question is what is keeping our church from growing? Because obviously it is God that wants to grow the church, and if it is a church that is after God's heart and is trying to do what God has called the leadership to do, and it is not a church that is has wickedness in it or that kind of thing, then what he's saying is growth should be natural. It should be happening on on a regular basis. So what we have to ask then is what is keeping us from growing, and as we answer those questions, then we will see the church really grow. Now it's been interesting because we're a little off the beaten path, but the last couple of months, 3 months maybe, several weeks, we've had a little campaign through Facebook. We've been trying to help people be aware of us. So I'm posting in Georgetown, Round Rock, Hutto, anybody that has a Facebook in Pflugerville, and in all of those areas that these ads are popping up. And so we've been seeing an increase in our visitors. We definitely have. This past weekend we had a family on Saturday night. We had 3, I think, this Sunday morning. So, and really wonderful family. So, now they're coming, and that represents growth. So now we have to figure out what would keep us from adding those families in. Now, not everybody that comes obviously is going to become a part of this church, but we have a really great opportunity since they've come here, they had a good experience, and so if we can eliminate things that will cause people not to want to stay, then growth should be real natural, and that's kind of what he brings out in the beginning. He said the key issue for churches in the 21st century will be church health, not church growth. So keeping the church healthy is a good segment of what he talks about there, and that means that bickering and fighting, jealousy, all the kinds of things that would be destructive to relationships. Those are the kinds of things that we keep at bay, and we keep the church as healthy as possible, that everybody is loving and warm towards one another, and that we're all keeping Jesus at the center of everything that we do. And the more that that's happening, the healthier church is, then the more attractive it becomes to people who come in and visit. They want to be somewhere that it's healthy. Pastors are the most strategic change agents to deal with the problems in our society. When we talk about the kinds of stuff that our world is dealing with, then we are really talking about straightening out some spiritual issues, and if we get things corrected along that line, then we'll have healthy communities, healthy nation. And so pastors and spiritual leaders are most strategically placed to help people understand that. This is not an issue of are you a Democrat or a Republican. It's an issue, are you a follower of Christ or not? And followers of Christ are going to be able to surrender themselves to the leadership of Christ over the community and for the best interest of the community, and see great things happen. So we're strategically placed, and God's going to be able to use us as we grow as leaders to make a difference in our community. He tells the Saddleback story. So I want to ask, what kind of jumped out at you about that story? There was a number of things for me. I'll talk about that too. But Jake, what about for you? What jumped out in the story?
I think this is a little different because I feel like I'm a part of Saddleback, just having been there so many times and listening to their podcasts every week. I already kind of knew their story, so learning the background of the story, how him and his friend drove from Dallas to San Francisco to that conference, and he was given a word by God through, one of the ministers there, and that that minister prayed for God to double the portion of faith and of the gifts. So it's arguably the most influential church on planet Earth. So God more than doubled the influence to that, what they do. I also like how they stayed faithful, meeting in 70, I think, 8 different locations before they actually had a campus. I've been to their campus. It was worth the wait. It's a place where you can easily find God through any number of different, if you like country music or if you like, hip hop or Latino music, you can go to all those different venues and worship in a way that you prefer, and then still get the message of Christ, all on the same campus. That's a pretty breathtaking experience to breathe in.
It is. I was struck by several things in when I first read the story, and really there was amazing growth counter to a lot of old growth beliefs. That a lot of them had to do with you can't grow if you're in too small of a building. You can't grow if you don't have a property in building. You can't grow if you don't if you move around too often. So it was amazing to kind of read through how that God was doing something, irrespective of how that they were having to function as a church. So, it really encourages us all that no matter, and we're a little bit off the beaten path, but we certainly have a beautiful facility, property, buildings, and we're in a lot better shape than they were when they started. So we can be encouraged that we have a really good opportunity, to get people to come and find us too. He talks about one time where people had to actually look in the newspaper to find out where they were meeting next week because the church was, not always able to keep their lease in some of these buildings, or they were outgrowing them, and so it's amazing to see how God grew them. There's a statement here where he says, "Vision is the ability to see the opportunities within the current circumstance." And I really like the way that, and I've always been drawn to Rick Warren's ministry, how that he's able to take some really deep truths and capsulize them for us and help us see what or understand what they're really all about. In that statement, the ability to see the opportunities within the current circumstance. When we think about the circumstances that we see, a lot of times we get discouraged and we don't see the opportunity in those things. A real effective leader, a spiritual leader is going to be able to see the opportunity. Remember when Paul went to found himself in the epicenter of Mars Hill, and that was a place where all the various gods of the Greeks had been. There was monuments raised up to them, and he saw opportunity there where other ministers might have said, "Well, why don't you guys come to the meeting that we're having tonight, and I'll explain to you what Christianity is all about." Paul stopped right there in the middle of where all those false idols were, and he said, "I want to talk to you about, you have a monument here to the unknown God, and I want to talk to you about the unknown God, or the God that you don't know." And I think great leaders are able to do that. Rick Warren is one who's always able to see the opportunity in the midst of real chaos, and we're in some trying times in our world. And so God's calling us as leaders to really be creative in how we can see opportunity in the midst of that. Hit some of the highlights on some of the things that he had to say. I wanted to skip over to he talks about how God miraculously provided for them financially. We have certainly seen that in our church, how God has come through and really provided when we've gone through some rough times. I wanted to get over to the section where he talked about the Saddleback Vision, and this is another good example of the way, in my book, it's on page 43, I'm not sure where it is on your book, but the Saddleback Vision is really excellent. He touches on this. It is a dream of a place where the hurting, the depressed, the frustrated, and the confused can find love, acceptance, help, hope, forgiveness, guidance, and encouragement. I don't read through all of those. You've read through that, but you can see there him attempting to capture in language that people can understand, and laying it out as the vision. This is what we want to do. This is what Christ would do, and this is what we want to do. And he's not saying we have the resources to do this right now. He's not saying we have the manpower to do this right now. He's just saying this is the dream of what the church should be. And he really begins to lay it out kind of like a treatise. And I really think that that's good exercise for all of us, that to just really lay out what would, when we were back in Phoenix and we went through the renaming of our church had a name that was more geographical. It was called Rose Lane Assembly of God. It was sitting on the corner of Rose Lane and 36th Avenue. And so when we were going away from that, because the geographic name was not helping us, people didn't really know where that location was in the city. The city had grown so much. We went to a name that identified our mission, and we called it Christ Church. And that's when we sat down and did kind of the dream statement. We talked about, what would it look like if Christ was the pastor, and this was his church, and every Sunday, everything gets accomplished that he wants accomplished here. And so as we begin to lay that out, we saw many of those similar kinds of things that you'll read in that statement that Rick Warren wrote that we highlighted out. And same thing with Grace Place. What do we want Grace Place to be? Christ is the head of this. He's the leader. What would it look like? What does a Grace Place look like in the hearts and the lives of the people that we come in contact? For me, I get the picture of it being a refuge, a place of hope, a place of forgiveness, a place of being able to start over again. And we have all of that, I think, as an opportunity for us as a church. It goes through the myths of growing the church. And again, we talked about that a little bit earlier, dispensing with the only thing large churches care about is attendance. So he dispenses with a lot of the myths that were behind, being large and growing, that sometimes prevented people, once they got a church to 150 or 200, they felt like, oh, we can pay the bills, we can take care of the mortgage, so we're big enough. And anything bigger than this is we're not really going to be effective. Well, he dispenses with all that through showing that that's myth, and that God's called us to continue to grow and to get bigger, because as we do, we have the resources, the manpower to make bigger impacts in community and do the kinds of things that God really would like us to do and has called us to do as His church. Alrighty. I highlighted this one. Ministry must be both fruitful or both faithful and fruitful. God expects both from us. I've found that a lot of times in working with young ministers that they don't really understand this principle that the faithfulness and the fruitfulness are things that God expects, and they both go hand in hand for us. And if we are going to be effective ministers for His kingdom, sometimes it's easy if we have a passion, we love church, we love God. It's easy. The faithful part is easy. The fruitful part is the part that we need to add. In other cases, it might be that we are charismatic individuals. We are automatically kind of fruitful in our ability to minister to other people, but we might be challenged with being faithful to the things that God's calling us to, the little things and the big things, and we might not see them as much as a priority as they should. So those things go hand in hand, and it's very important that God doesn't want one or the other. He wants both. Or as Radio Man said, I want both. So what else did I want to cover with you in the book? Okay, the primary issues of church health and growth. So he asked the three questions here to begin with. Who is our master? Page 71 on mine. I don't know if it's the same one yours. No. Who is our master? What is our message? And what is our motive? So for next week, what I'd like you to do is answer for Grace Place right there. That's, is it page 71 in the new books? Okay, page 71, right in the center there. And you can either write in your book or you can write on a piece of paper beside that. Answer these questions. So there's 6 total. Those are the first 3. What is, who is our master? What is our message? What is our motive? And second, who is our market? What are our models? And what are our methods? So based on your experience at Christ Church, what do you think? That will be our assignment for next week out of the Purpose-Driven Church. So out of the Grace Place, what is, answer that for us, or based on your experience with the Grace Place and how you have seen this maybe modeled. And I had shared a little story with Jake. It's too long to share here, but just suffice to say, I got a chance to kind of watch Amanda and Zach, and I saw them, carrying on some things that Michelle and I have modeled and taught. and it was not provoked by us or encouraged or um, even recommended by us. We didn't know they were going to do this, but very spontaneous, and it was a beautiful work of love in their life towards another couple that's in the congregation here. And I went away from that saying to Jake that, hey, if this is the future of the church, looking at all of you guys and seeing you carry these things on, and it's not just them. I've seen many of you guys doing some of the same kinds of things. Then we're in very good hands. The church has a good future. Sometimes, as pastors and as we get older, we get a little discouraged. We wonder how much of what we're saying, and we spend a lot of time in study and preparation, and how much of that is really seeping in, how much of it is really taking in effect. And we're really starting to see the results here at the Grace Place, and it's exciting to be a part of what God's doing here and to kick off this Ministers in Training and to make this something that, we're just expanding our influence. We're expanding my influence, your influence to others around us, so that it's not just one or two people trying to do the work or three or four people trying to do the work, but we're putting together an army. So we're not going to despise small beginnings. We're going to keep doing this and keep growing each time. And I want to encourage you to do your reading, because most of this is self-directed, and that's how you're going to learn and grow. And then when you get finished, you can bring questions. So I'm going to sign off here. We'll give students here a chance to ask questions they might want to ask about the Synoptic Gospels or the Purpose-Driven Life, and then we'll close class.